first item is the approval of the meeting minutes from October 13th.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, moving on. Item 3, is there anybody from the public here to discuss an item that's not on the agenda? Okay, nope. Item 4, the Eagle Scout project proposal from Trey Hodson Pillar.
I don't see him here, but he has completed a project of constructing some birdhouses that are, I think they're all up at soccer now, at the Kicker Soccer Complex, kind of in that north area that we're going to be adding some prairie to, so it's a good habitat spot for it. So he was just going to present that to you guys, just let you know what he did. I think Josh had been trying to coordinate with him on timing for this, and maybe he ended up with last minute conflict.
Okay, well, very good. Sounds like a good project. All right, the next item is the Chaddock Green Park project design review. So before we sort of start this, I think Julie's going to present the.
Yeah. So in your packet it says that Don Marner will be here from Snyder and Associates to present. He is quarantined in his basement at the moment, so he is not here tonight. So I will be doing the presentation that he would be giving. I have Nick from Snyder and Associates back here to help if there's specific questions from the landscape architect, and Tyler will jump in.
Okay.
The three of us will give you a great presentation. And we're going to walk through the 3 projects for 2022 separately.
Yep.
I'll give the presentation, then we'll have time for public comment. Public comment is comment, it's not question and answer with the commission. So we'll take any questions you may have or any concerns, and I'll write them down. And then following public comment will be a time for the commission discussion, and we can answer questions that come up at that point, if that all makes sense for you.
Good. All right.
All right, so we're going to start out with Chaddock Green Park. And I pulled this one up also on the aerial so you can see it. It is a 5-acre park south of Court Street on Friendship, kind of south of City High School. Was owned by the Chaddock family and was a landscaping business for some time. I hope I got the right term for that. City bought it with the intention of it being a park. And to this point, it has been one of our primary community garden sites. And for us, community garden means garden plot rental. Individuals rent a plot, take care of it on their own. We provide the place, the space, we till it in the beginning, and we clean it up at the end. That's been the primary use, but this project looks at adding some additional neighborhood park amenities. So let me take you back to the presentation. This is just showing the location of the 3 parks we're talking about tonight. Can you all see this, or do we need to turn the light?
I can see it fine.
Okay. I'd rather leave the lights on so you don't fall asleep on me. We have Chaddock Green here, Fort Hill to the east of it, and then Whispering Meadows down into the southeast portion of the city. With Chaddock Green, here's the existing aerial again. This one doesn't show the gardens as they are right now, so let me pull this one up again. This one shows the most recent garden expansion, which is probably 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It was before it was this plot and about this much of this plot. You can see kind of the old ground here. We moved those back, and then so it was out of the right of way of Friendship Street, because when that street develops, it will get curb and sidewalk at that point. So we moved out of the way of that and expanded the number of plots at that time. The rest of the park has been left in a untouched mowed turf grass state. This pathway through here is blocked up here in the top left corner. We did have trouble at first with cars driving through there. So you can see the path there, but it really is more park, it's all parkland here. Whoops. public meeting a few weeks ago where we showed 4 concepts for development in the park area at Chatty Green. All of these, I'm sorry, 2 concepts. They show this one here on the bottom left shows a rectangular shelter, a circle area that would have a small playground in the middle, 4 or 5 accessible parking spaces here along the alley, or there is a name of that street, but right there, and then a paved path that would take you to the east gardens with space for additional compost storage, things like that that the gardeners use. In addition, since this drawing, there was a lot of interest in some raised beds, so we would likely put raised beds somewhere here close to the accessible parking and this first bank of gardens. And then finally, a restroom facility, a standalone restroom facility, very similar to what we've recently put in at Weatherby, McPherson, several of the park projects that we've done recently. The other option looks at it with the shelter and the playground, a little bit different alignment, and the restroom being included with the shelter. Staff would not recommend that simply because all of our other park designs now are going to a shelter and restroom separately. And that's nice if you are renting the shelter, you don't have the general public coming up and using the restroom through the middle of your party or whatever to do that. So the concepts all kind of show the same thing. Staff would recommend that we go with something similar to this with shelter, playground, restroom, garden amenities, and accessible parking. So right now, parking is on the street, or there is kind of a gravel parking lot right here now. But this would make it handicap accessible and provide a few spaces. Not enough for all the gardeners, obviously. The other thing that the plans show is a future spot for additional garden plots, and that's one of the questions we'll ask you about. It's shown as master planning in this particular project just because one of the requests from a lot of the gardeners is additional water sources, and so we're going to go underground and start putting water into the other 2 garden plots. It would definitely make sense to prepare it at least for a 3rd site if we were going to do that. So that's one of the reasons for that. We showed several different playground images to the public. We had 5 different proposals, and I'll come back to this later on in your discussion. They're pretty small pictures there. There was a survey available that night, so we had the design boards out in the park. Myself, I was there, Don was there from Snyder & Associates, and Nick was there. 2 picnic tables, we had lots of sheets of paper to have people give their comments. It was a very spirited discussion that night in the park, and we tried to encourage everyone to go ahead and write their comments down so you would have those, which they are in your packet. After we finished the event in the park, it was available online for about 7 or 8 days with additional press about that. So we got quite a few survey results. So in total, there was 22 comment forms received, 2 email comments, 8 post-meeting comments, and 17 online responses. So that's pretty good response rate for a park project of this size. You can see here the playground, there was votes for all the 5 different options, and then 7 people voting not to have a playground. And that was one of the discussion topics at night with residents on both sides, wanting a playground or not wanting a playground in the park, and that'll be a question we ask you about in just a few minutes. Earth tone seems to be the color option that people would like if there is a playground. And then the amenities, our restroom scores pretty high, drinking fountain scores pretty high, the park shelter scores pretty high, although we have some options on whether we do a large size shelter or a smaller one, so we'll talk about that. And then open play space, so there was a lot of concern that we leave a fair amount of open play space in that particular park. All right, with that said, there's several questions that we're going to ask you on this one in order. I'm going to brief you on what those questions are, and then we'll give time for public comment and come back to them. But first of all, first set of improvements that we were considering would be the accessible parking spaces, paved path to the easternmost garden, and raised beds along that area. And I should mention additional gates into the fence. There's a fence around that garden. And then we want you to think about what other facilities would you like us to consider to add to help with the community gardens at that spot. We will ask, would you like there to be a permanent restroom or not? That's one of the components shown here. And should it have a shelter? And if so, what size? Kind of the two choices there would be, the size proposed now is similar to what's at McPherson or Willow Creek or Weatherby. Those are all kind of the same size. Or a smaller one, which would be similar to what we put in at Scott Park last summer, or Cardigan, or Villa Park, kind of the 8, or they help me with the size there.
I think they were 20, I thought they were 24 by 20, I thought they were square.
Yeah, they're square
24 by 24.
24 by 24 shelters. So can have those two options with that. Should we include a playground? And if so, which of the 5 proposals? And then what about planning for additional community garden plots? On the last question, I would tell you that the staff recommendation is to at least plan for the additional plots. The garden plots last year across the city sold out within 3 hours. And by far, Chaddock Green is the most popular garden spot. There are a number of concerns from the neighbors about the space in the park, and we can go through that. As far as operations go though, having more gardens in one spot and then having more of a central location helps with our staff time for monitoring and doing all that. Any of these items are up for discussion and up for your recommendations. So along the way, after we have the public comment, I can give you more of the staff feedback on why these things are recommended and answer questions. So that's the end of the presentation. With that, we'll open it up to public comment. If you have public comment, if you would please state your name and address so Tammy can capture it for the minutes. Go ahead.
Shall I speak from my chair?
Yeah, you can take your mask off so we can
Hi,
hear you.
my name is Teresa Hardgree. I have gardened at Chaddock every year so far, and I would like to commend Parks and Recs for creating beautiful parks. I love the shelters, the sculptures, the restrooms. I think you're on the right track. I have no reservations about the work this group is doing. I think it's marvelous, and I think children get to have playgrounds, yes, and there'll still be enough room to space to move around. I think that Chaddock is a convenient place, and I understand the convenience of having gardening focused in terms of the staff maybe supplying materials that could be used for mulching. And when I look at gardening, I would like to ask Parks and Recs to look at community gardens as a great resource or an asset in which our community can distinguish itself, like other communities have across the Midwest, recognizing that community gardens deserve funding, they deserve staff time, smart, dedicated staffers for whom this is their mission, to make a success of community gardens. We see a lot of support. Everybody wants a garden and they're all got stars in their eyes. When they get out there, the soil's never been tested on a factory site. We never heard the results. You can't hardly get water. It's very, very limited, and we are heading into more drought, it appears. And when you're looking at how can you access the plot, like I'm old, but I still want to drag in bales of hay or straw. Actually, straw is what I use for mulch to suppress weeds and to keep on to the moisture. But you know, it's hard. The closest I can get my vehicle to my plot, I have to go over 2 fences. And there's going to be nowhere for me to park. Like, this may sound silly, but I would like there to be a vehicular access where I could get like from here to there with my car, and I could load off my gear, my amenities, my bales of hay, and then drive my car back out of there. I don't want to park in the middle of the park. But I do want there to be parking on this giant area. I don't mind if it's just gravel. The more we concentrate the gardens, the more pressure we put on the streets around this garden. So we're building ourselves into a possible problem if we don't allocate, even in the most informal way, somewhere for gardeners to park, and hopefully for them to park close to their plot. The fence is totally unhelpful. It doesn't keep out deer, it keeps out gardeners. I don't know where it came from. There was an interesting and thought-provoking plan for this garden generated by Backyard Abundance and Fred Meyer. And you might refer back to that, because there's a guy with some great ideas. But that's really not for me to say. But so I'll just conclude by saying I'd like to see the soil test. I'd like to get a little closer to my garden plot. I'd like to maybe see some support, like if we have compost that we gather, we pay taxes for the weeds to be gathered up, drive around and make them into compost. We can't, pay 50 cents for a little bucket of compost. We should have a mountain of compost from the city, for the city's community gardeners to succeed. Because right now, all those people so eager to get a plot, they fizzled out in 3 weeks to a month. So I'm a gardener. I keep my plot going all year long, all season long, but I'm a hardcore gardener. Everybody else is like, look, and there was weeds taller than me covered with chiggers, and kids hardly walk through it. I'm just saying that most plots are abandoned immediately because we aren't supporting them and helping them be gardeners. Now when we have softball or something, we got big nice lights. We're paying to run the lights. We got really nice parking. We're mowing the lawns. I mean, somebody in the city decided that was important. We wanted to do that. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and just say in conclusion that I think that community gardens offer our community good exercise, a family activity. It encourages a healthy diet. Like, there's enough advertising for fast food. Who's doing it for like vegetables? We are in the gardens with our children. It improves food security. We see disruption in food supply chain. We got to grow more in our county. It's a chance to connect with nature. You're looking up at the trees. There's no screens involved. Thank heaven, something that doesn't involve a screen for myself as well as the children. And it also is an opportunity for a sort of a spiritual opening to the miracle of growing your own vegetables. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Teresa, for your comments. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Linda Jedwin. I live in Linden Road, Iowa City. To piggyback her comment about support for gardens, I'm a master gardener in Johnson County, and there would be a resource of master gardeners who might be willing to help with a project through your gardens, just as a resource for you to think about. And if you contact them at the extension office out of Johnson County Fairgrounds, you can get more information. And they be volunteers. Free. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate your comments.
My name is Roxanne Mitton, 2116 Friendship Street, 1 block away from Chaddock Green. And I too am a gardener at Chaddock. And it's a delightful location. And one of the takeaways I have from that animated meeting was how much people are enjoying the open space. And that there was a lot of discouragement for the extra garden, and I recognize developing infrastructure while infrastructure being laid out is pretty important. But looking at the neighborhood kinds of focus that have been with parks and looking at the amount of space there relative to somewhere, say at Weatherby, where there's also a park where dovetailing with city workers, expanding in that area could create a lot more garden without the impact on this area where the neighborhood is wanting that open space. So I'm just like that piece in. I greatly support having a restroom. It's pretty uncomfortable for me working there, and I can walk home, but most people aren't. It's difficult. The water access has been extremely challenging, so I highly support putting in the structure for the watering. Having a long history of looking at water management, I'm going to suggest for future, at least to think about metering water. Like National Park, you put in a quarter basically to take a shower because, and I do it too. When I'm running the water is running. I'm no exception to that. And we have climate change pieces going on, and I consider the nominal fees associated with that. I love the idea of having a shelter and a playground and seeing gardeners, family playing in that great area. What I'm concerned about is that on the neighborhood piece, I've seen a lot what's been happening in McPherson, and there is a huge amount of activity at McPherson. My question, the larger you build shelters, the more come, and that kind of pulls away from neighborhood. That's as a person there, I would encourage the smaller of these structures versus a big party shelter. You know, where people are doing big time parties, there's no parking, there's not going to be parking to support that. That's just my take on it. I love what you guys are doing with the parks. I love going around seeing in the various areas, you know, the splash pad and the play going on there, the plantings, the sculptures, art, just the feel of everything. I love the mission you all are doing, so I say thank you for that. That's all.
Thank you, Roxanne, appreciate your comments. All right.
Did you want me to answer some of the
Yep.
questions that came?
Why don't
Okay.
you address those?
So hopefully I'm a good scribe and I caught some of the questions and comments. So first of all, Teresa had mentioned the 2018 plan by Backyard Abundance. This was in the packet that went out to the commission. It's online. This is the drawing, one of the drawings from the packet. They had a much larger presentation. But this was their concept. The beds are a little bit different, but you can see that it does include the fence here and the second bed, larger beds over here. We weren't able to do most of the things that Backyard Abundance had suggested at the time because of the cost associated with it. And knowing that this larger project was coming up in a few years, we decided to wait and roll that in to the larger project. The fence is the one thing from his plan that we were able to put in, and probably the most controversial with the gardeners. So, I don't know, we tried to do what we were asked to do, and it didn't work out so well. We agree that that fence doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and at the very least, we can improve that with this particular project. Some of the other things that plan showed was a sculpture, which is in place now. Some kids play area, but this is more like a natural play area. And then a gathering space, these are picnic tables. So it's similar to some of the concepts that are being shown at this point, just in a little bit different configuration, partially because of where utilities are located and the costs associated. That's why we decided to put the restroom and shelter where we put them in the plan, is that it's much less expensive to put them over there. So that is that part. As far as all the improvements that could be done with the actual gardening program, we wholeheartedly agree with all three of you on that one. The soils actually have been tested, and we can make sure you go get that information, because they were tested last year at a request of someone. Tyler?
Yeah, someone requested a test. We did test on all the different places that we have gardens. They all work pretty close to being right on what they should be for good garden growth. Of course, tomatoes take something different than some other veggies, so it really depends on what each gardener is growing to a certain extent, but for an average garden, the plots had good soil health. We were able to make a few amendments in a couple of the different spots to even increase that this year. But that was one question we kept getting. So we did test it, and we were happy with the results. Somewhat of a misconception: if you continue to add compost constantly, it actually works against your healthier soil, and you can, harm it to the other extent, so your crops aren't doing as well. There's a whole idea that you should be able to plunge your arm into your elbow, from way back when in your garden. that's not necessarily the best type of soil to grow every type of veggie. So we're trying to get that, you know, happy medium. We had an outside company test, and they were able to get that test for us.
You can ask kind of questions about that after the meeting or after this item. You can answer those if it's specifically about soil testing. The other part about the garden operations is right now there's also another survey on our city website under the recreation page asking gardeners for exactly this kind of information and looking at how we improve our programming and you know, everything that happens within the site. So this particular project is looking more at the hard improvements. The actual operations of the gardens take place through the recreation division, and they're working on those kind of separately from this, hoping for some improvements with that. As far as additional water things, that's one of the definite things we're looking at in adding through this project is more water lines with more spigots closer to different parts of the gardens. Likely improving the access within the garden spaces. We've heard a lot this past summer about there being issues with the pathways not being cleared, overgrown. So we're looking at ways to improve that. The picket fence, or the split rail fence around, was a question that came up the night of the meeting of why is it there, and I don't think any of us know. So I'm not sure that needs to stay. That's kind of something that's been there for a while. We don't really know why it was there. So that's kind of the overall gardening operations questions. We agree that there could be a lot of improvements on how those are managed. Right now, we rent the spaces, and that's about what we do. We do have some staff that's been able to do some work with that, but not nearly the amount that would be really beneficial out there. As far as master gardeners, sure, we would love to see what we can do and partner with that more. Some of the questions have come up about the open space. So this is also in your packet. Chad Green Park is 5 acres in size. Right now, approximately 0.7 acres of the park has garden rental plots. With the proposed parking area, restroom, shelter, and playground, that would cover an additional 0.3 acres of land. And if a third section of garden rental plots were placed there, it would cover an additional ½ acre. So with all of those improvements, that would still leave 3.4 acres of open space, like the mowed turf grass with some trees in it, in that park. And to give you a sense of how big that is, it is, Creekside has 0.8 acres. Frontalds Miller, which half of the park is open space there, that's 0.9 acres. Cardigan around the circle area is about 1 acre. Scott Park has more, it has 6.6 acres. That's of course the touch football fields area there. Pheasant Hill Park, which is closed, has 2.4 acres, but most of that is pretty steep slopes. It's not really an open soccer field type space. Calder Park has 0.7. So for the most part, leaving still 3.4 acres of mowed turf or unimproved open space is significantly larger than most of our other similar parks. So I'm just bringing that up. It's debatable how much is enough and how much is not, but that is that's how we measure the acres on that. Parking and paving, the staff recommendation on that is largely due to accessibility concerns, and as you know, that's been a major improvement we've been trying to do throughout the system, is to add the paving. We don't like to pave grass areas any more than anyone else, but it's necessary to provide a wide range of access. Talked about the garden rental things. So the restroom and shelter, I think we've heard positive things about the restroom. There were some people concerned about lighting and security on that.
Wow.
You'll never miss a call.
I just turned that off.
With our restrooms throughout the system, we do get a hit or miss vandalism throughout the restroom system. We had quite a bit this summer. Nothing that has ever gone further than the actual restroom facility or the park shelter facility, so nothing out into the neighbors. But we're pretty confident it wouldn't be any different, and it would be security lighting only, not lighting up the skies by any means on here. The playground, as I said, had a lot of discussion, a lot of people in favor, a lot of people pretty opposed to it. I included in your packet the distance to the other playgrounds. So McPherson is only 0.2 miles away, but you have to cross, make sure I get the right street, Muscatine to get to it. Court Hill is close, but you have to cross First Avenue. Pheasant Hill is 1 mile away, but same thing, you have to cross Court Street and to get there. And Glendale is 0.7 miles away, but also has a couple of those streets between it. The other thing that I didn't include that was brought to my attention is that the old Cooper Elementary playground is now gone. So that serviced this neighborhood, that is no longer there. So this playground could be seen as a replacement for that one as well. The size is similar to what we've done in a number of other smaller parks. So Villa Park on the west side, Cardigan, Scott Park, Ronald's Miller. So they're meant to be walk-in to the surrounding neighborhood. These are not sized for huge gatherings. Now the shelter has some flexibility to it for that reason. The thought with the larger shelter was actually to encourage the gardeners to have more social contact and potlucks and that sort of thing, but you could definitely go with the smaller shelter in this case too.
Julie, is this,
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to, like, can we interject questions as topics arise?
I think
Or would you rather?
Are you done?
I got one more thing, but
Let's just let her finish and then we can just.
You want to collect
And
all
then,
the,
and we'll just have
yeah.
an overall discussion.
Okay, so that's kind of the distance to the other playgrounds in the area. And then finally, the garden plots question. So right now, we have 273 garden plots around the community. Last year, as I said, those all sold out in the spring in 3 hours. So they are popular. It is a council strategic goal related to both local foods and climate action. So we support that. Why not do it at more parks? So we heard, why not spread it out to more parks? Believe it or not, there's not many parks that have sites that are appropriate for gardens. A lot of our parks are part of the stormwater system, so you can't put a garden where it's intended for the floodwaters to come through. We have areas of the park that look flat, but they are wetlands essentially that are not appropriate. Or you have other topography or reasons. We have honestly researched just about every park to see where we might be able to put more garden plots, and there's a few more possibly, but it's not as prevalent as you think it might be for garden sites. Whereas this site does offer, it's already flat, it's already connected with the other gardens. In a staff perspective, this would be a good site, understanding that, and of course that would bring in more cars, more parking, but when we plot out where the gardeners come from around Chaddock, the majority are from the neighborhood, so they aren't coming from very far. I know they still drive, but just something to balance that with too. Okay.
All right. We'll open this up to discussion. Chris, sounds like.
I was just trying to get an idea in my head as to what the objection was to the playgrounds.
I believe it was two things in general. Concern that the playground was going to take away the wide open green turf area for kite flying and football playing and frisbee. I'm not sure we did a very good job that night of showing the dimensions of how big things would be or how much space they actually would take. By calculations, it's really not that much, and it would still leave it open. I think there's also concerns that it would bring in parties or more people into the park. But then quietly off to the side, I had some people say to me, I live close by and I don't garden, but I would love to bring my kids here to play. So it's a balancing between that. And I would say that it's not sized to be a destination playground. It's sized to serve people that can walk there from their houses. So,
one of the concerns that was brought up in regards to parking was just kind of the permeability, so of just more concrete, same with some of the paths. Is that something that, I'm just not as knowledgeable about some of those pieces that way. Is that something to explore? I just wasn't sure about that.
It is something to explore. When our primary goal is accessibility though,
Yeah.
you know, it could be that the pathway up to the first set of gardens and the, you know, the amenities is the solid, and then if we would do additional paths in the future, I would say definitely those should be of a permeable type. But I don't know, Nick, do you have anything else you could add about using permeable concrete?
I think, to be honest, I think the accessibility can be a concern, and the maintenance, unfortunately, it's not, put it in and just kind of leave it. There are things, maintenance that are associated with that something to be considered. Also, typically there's stormwater subdrain that's associated with that permeability, and that's, again, that's something else that, I don't know, is a budget, and that, I mean, there's more to it than unfortunately just putting it down. So, other considerations.
I'll add, it's currently sited on top of primarily, if not completely, on a spot that the parking anyway, that's already gravel, that's heavily compacted. So the difference in the permeability of that gravel that's heavily compacted and the concrete isn't going to be the same gap of difference if you have grass there currently or some other type of vegetation. So there is a difference, but it's not as drastic of a difference.
So how many parking spots are we?
It's 4 or 5.
I think it's 5.
5.
One accessible for.
Which is essentially what's there is a gravel lot right now.
Has the budget been discussed for this project?
Everything that we've shown you is within the budget. The additional things that we may want to do with the gardens will probably come from city climate action funds rather than this project, so there's still some flexibility with that funding at this point.
Okay.
It seemed like there were a lot of comments in the packet about the neglected garden plots, and is there any consideration of what could be done with that, or to help people who kind of fizzle out after a couple weeks, or otherwise encourage them to keep their plots tidy?
So the official rules say that if you neglect the garden, you can't rent it the next year. I will tell you, we haven't had the staff resources to actually go out and police, or the knowledge to do that. So it's something we can definitely look at, and that's part of what this survey is looking at with the gardeners, to answer that question, what could be done differently. We did, 3 years ago, offer beginner gardening classes, and that too, we had a lot of people, same thing, really good intentions at the beginning, and it takes a lot of work, obviously. So we don't police it very well right now, but you know, that's something that we're definitely looking at. So, yeah.
One else?
Are you looking for?
So, well, now I think what we need to do is sort of sleuth out what we're gonna motion for.
We're hoping for one motion after
One
we
motion to
answer all
kind
these
of cover all
questions.
the questions, including the parking, the restroom, we include a shelter, we include a playground. Plan for existing additional garden spots, and the raised beds. Did I miss something?
You kind of got it all. So you could just, you got the questions right. Yeah, engineers.
Okay, so we know how to officially do this. So do we, how do?
Are you just looking for conversation, and that will precede a motion to approve this item in Globo?
Yes.
Okay, correct. So I'm happy to start that off.
Okay.
I'm not going to speak to every single thing because, and if I don't speak to any particular thing, then I'm in favor of the staff recommendation. One thing that I'm a little, I guess, in noodling through the objection to the playground, that's maybe the thing that I kind of saw the most because it really is in conversation with like the green space. So I was interested to see the acreage that will remain open space. That made me feel good. And I like the idea of expanding the space available for gardening. I hope that, I know we divide Parks and Rec between the parks and the recreation, so the programming is one side. We're talking about the hardscaping, the park on this side. But I would hope that in adding more garden space and more infrastructure around the garden space here, that'll be in conversation with whatever comes out of the survey for improving the programming of that hard space, whether it's master gardeners, additional resources and staff. I recognize that's not what this is. As far as the playground, I guess I'm a little troubled by the objections to it because, you know, and I think who is this for? Who is the park for? You know, we're worried about people coming in and using the park, and I feel a little uncomfortable with that language and maybe like what that could possibly imply. This is not a huge playground, it's a small playground, and what I notice among all of our parks is that we're trying to incorporate amenities that can be used by different users in the community. Some want open space, some want to run, some will play kite, but some want to play on the playground. I don't see putting a playground here as being in tension with maintaining this particular characteristic of Chaddock Green, which is the community garden. And I also think that to the extent we can add things that make this more accessible, I don't mean accessible for the parking, although I agree with that too, but accessible for people who might want to use this park not for gardening, I think is favorable.
And I'll just piggyback, if you look at the numbers, 2/3 of the respondents were actually in favor of the playground. So, anyway, good comments. Who else, Billy? Any thoughts?
I'm really in favor of just about everything, anything that'll increase accessibility and usability for the parks. I wouldn't want to see anybody excluded. I don't want kids to not have a place to play on a playground if they want to play on it. So yeah, I'd be in favor of everything, the parking, maybe the smaller shelter, just to kind of address some of the concerns that the community brought up. But everything else, I have no objections to any of that, except maybe the additional garden plots, and I think the plan is to currently just plan for them in the future, but not in the short term, immediate.
Now, were the raised beds part of this initial project?
They can be, as long as you, that's one of the things that it doesn't show on the drawings, but it's definitely something we've talked about.
Can we just
numerous times, so.
really 30,000 feet discuss what the raised bed looks like compared
Yeah, and
to
Tyler.
practicality?
Yeah, I can start with it. There used to be 2 raised beds at this location. They, however, were not actually accessible in accessibility terms, and they were quite small. They were not rented often. There was a couple that did use them to provide produce to donate for at least a couple of years. But the idea would be to have them close to an accessible parking, so you have really nice connectivity there. You're able to, get from your vehicle to those in a short amount of, distance, and then able to reach things. So they'd be we follow ADA standards. I don't know what all those are off the top of my head, but so you can reach all the parts of your plot and get up to it in a more accessible way.
Anyone else? So, all right, so I think I'm going to summarize what I think we're going to recommend. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So, we're going to recommend that put in PIP parking spots, put in the restrooms, recommend the smaller shelter, recommend the playground be included. You wanted us to,
We can come back.
okay, we'll come back to that. And put in the infrastructure for more water and everything in the area. And then leaving the expansion of garden plots into the plan, but not expanding them at this juncture. So is there a motion to approve?
I second that.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed?
So we had 5 options here. They're very similar in price and similar in scope. They're not, a lot of them are very similar to what you've already seen at other playgrounds. In this case, staff is recommending option 1, and under voting, or the input from the public,
6 altogether.
yeah.
And online.
Right. And the reason being is that we really like the unique circle design that this one provides. So it's not very big, but it provides kind of a runway for kids to play on that upper level, as well as when you count the number of play options on it, we think this one is a little bit higher than the other options that you had there. If you remember some of the discussion about the Pedmal replacement, we heard often there how parents really wanted to have kids have kind of an open runway place around it. That is our recommendation. Any of these will work. This one is pretty basic. It would be similar to what we have in several other parks. This one is the same company that is doing the Pedmal new playground, so it looks very much like what's going in on the Pedmal. This one, we're concerned about the shade sales, and this one being kind of a maintenance issue, so that's why we would recommend that one. And the last one has a farm theme, and that one would be fine too.
Where's the proposed placement? Maybe I missed that in the packet, so I just might have glossed over it, and I apologize.
So if you're looking at this one in the bottom left, you would come out from the parking area. Here's the garden plots down below, the restroom, and then the playground would be here in this circle with the shelter right next to it.
It lines up with the trees that are currently on site between the 2 garden plot areas, so it'd be on that same axis there, and the same axis as the sculptures at that end as well.
Just trying to think of line of sight for the playground, if better open spaces was a concern now.
Yeah, so that's all happening, if I pull up.
The open space would be on the north of that,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
Yeah.
so that here on this, and I'm not as good at doing this bigger. Sorry, we'll just leave it there. If you can see the cursor, this section right here is really the developed space that we would be looking at for those items. So all of this area here, and it looks a little different here on this particular aerial, but that is all mowed turf grass now, except there's a pile, still a pile of mulch and dirt right here, but you're looking at not even half of the park, even with the garden expansion happening.
Thank you.
So is there a preference on,
Is there a preference on the option 1, I think was the staff recommendation.
this is the staff recommendation?
Yeah, right there. The circle looks low.
So,
Motion to approve option 1 for
Second.
all right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, great. Well, thank you. Well, that closes that agenda item. I'm gonna go back up to item 4 since Trey showed up and he can discuss his birdhouses project. And if-
Brad, can I ask you to go see if you can find Jeff and see if there's anything that can make the room a little cooler?
And you're more than welcome to stay, and if you don't want to stay, you can free to leave as well. So, thank you. All right, Trey,
All right, so.
thanks for showing up. Appreciate it.
Why don't you come up to the
You can come up to the table.
Like where?
Right there.
area?
Put this right here.
Thank you, appreciate your participation. Have a nice evening.
So I'm Trey Pillar from True 2000 with in the Boy Scouts in Portland. And for my Eagle project, I decided to do something like, with parks. So I hit up Iowa Parks and Rec. And then they said that they need people to build birdhouses for them. So, what we got here is a birdhouse. The this is just a model one. This would be like rough wood on the outside, which is not the case of this. These are all made of cedar. They have a removable screw right here so you can flip open a side panel, clean it out, whatever. And putting 10 of these in the Kickers Iowa City soccer park.
Did you leave them natural, or did you paint them?
Oh no, we left them natural.
Okay.
Rough wood on the
Yeah.
outside.
So does somebody go through every spring and remove the nest? Is that, like, how does that?
Yeah, we'll do that with staff.
Okay.
We'll look at, cleaning out what needs to be cleaned out and
Yeah.
whatnot. We may not get around every single time there's a starling using a box or something like that,
Right.
but we'll do our best to
Yeah.
monitor them as well.
They look very nice. You make that all yourself?
Actually, well, my dad did the cutting, but yeah.
But
With-
nice work. Yeah, that's good.
Was there a specific species of bird that you?
Oh yeah, bluebirds.
Bluebirds.
There's no specific species of bluebirds, but I do know that whatever species these bluebirds are that we're building houses for, they're supposed to be like 100 yards apart or so. They live far apart, so.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a great project. Appreciate you coming to share with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay.
All right, Bob. It's warm here.
That'll work. Thank you. Okay, next project,
Item 6, Court Hill.
Court Hill Park. First of all, big shout out to the neighborhood in this particular open house. We miscalculated sunset that night. And so if you saw in your packet, there were people out there with flashlights still giving comments towards the end of the meeting. It was a really fun night, but it was, it was interesting. So once again, with Court Hill Park, we're recommending some renovations here that include replacement of the playground, replacement of both of the shelters, with the shelter near the playground replaced in a similar location, and the one on the northern part of the park taken out, and then a smaller shelter moved closer to the new basketball court. This is the existing aerial. Court Hill is kind of a long linear park, very well used with the trail system through it. And then the playground is kind of situated back here along the creek. So you walk into it quite a distance from either side.
Is that where we ate lunch during?
Yes.
I mean, dinner.
That's where we ate dinner on our parks tour as a commission. Very well used playground back there, probably one of the oldest ones left in our system at this point, and probably the oldest shelter left in our system back there. So we had a couple different concepts for the area with the current playground and shelter. Mainly just being the alignment of the shelter. We kept the playground area similar to what it is right now. This option shows a square design and the shelter moves slightly, but is similar to where it's at now. Option 2 over here makes it more of a loop curve around the playground space with a paved trail around that space. And then shifts the shelter to a little bit different direction, which then gives us this kind of curved trail from the main trail. And this one is the one we would actually, that staff would recommend. Oops, shoot, sorry. Anyway, so this is the one that we are recommending. They're very similar. I think we had comments kind of on both sides at night, but then when we talked about this access off the trail, people seem to really like that idea too. So, with this one, once again, we offered 5 different choices on playgrounds. And in this case, kind of the not overwhelming, but the most popular public choice was option 3. It's colorful, it has a number of play things similar in scope and size to what's there, it's just updated. The one other request from the public was could they have more monkey bars, so we would see if we could have more, and then they can usually accommodate that with that. So we had that. And this is the survey, and here's the survey results. As you can see, option 3 had about 19 people, the other ones were 3. Option 5 had 10. And it appears like earth tones is probably the choice, although secondary colors is kind of a nice, got a lot of comments too. The thing I didn't show you on the map was, like I said, on the north side, you have a path through the longer section of the park along the creek. Right now there's an older shelter closer to Port Street, and then we have the renovated basketball courts. What this would do is take that larger shelter out and then put in a smaller version of the cover bricks like we've done at the other parks, closer to the basketball court, so we can have one accessible path to the basketball court and the shelter. And we're hoping to get the drainage fixed at the same time. It's been a problem on that basketball court for quite a while. So this one is a little more straightforward, a lot more straightforward. Comments and the public there were some other ideas presented, asks for splash pads and a few other things that a few people here and there asked for. Our recommendation would be to stay with similar amenities what we have in other parks. There was a request for solar lighting on the shelter, and I think that's something we should definitely look into. And in this part, so this is the trail here through the longer part and the creek. When you get down to Friendship, between Friendship and the playground, you can see we actually own park property on the west side of the creek. And it is a maintenance access through there, so there was questions from the public of could we sign it so people know it's a public access. I don't think we would ever improve it, to a paved trail or anything, but that would be something else to consider. It's just another way to walk to that playground. So that's what I have on this.
Any comments?
Linda Dillon again, I live over on Linden Road. And for several years we lived on Friendship. And so our family has used this park for about 35 years with kids and grandkids. I appreciate the opportunity for the public to get input on this new park. My older grandkids and I sat down with an online picture and really tore it apart as far as the features of what's happening. They were delighted to hear that design number 3, this is one that's probably been chosen, because they really felt that it gave good opportunity for both toddler and older grade school kids to have a playground. And it does show a little bit more separation for 2 age groups. So if you're like me, a grandma trying to keep track of a 2-year-old, you can really get in there and block off who you don't want to go. Or if they get up there, I can physically get up there and get them out. So I do appreciate that. One feature of all the playgrounds we would recommend changing. You have the toddler swing, and the second swing next to it is a parent swing in a lot of these.
Parent-child swing?
Yes, yes. And we're recommending you have 2 toddler swings because if you have a 3-year-old, you probably have a 2-year-old. If you have 2 little twins, you're going to have trouble explaining which child gets to swing and which child doesn't. When I've taken the younger kids to the park, like the 1.5 to 2-year-olds who aren't swinging independently yet, I sit down on an adult swing and just hold them. I mean, I'm not swinging, I'm just gentle rock. So please consider at least 2 toddler swings in your swing arrangement, please. The color scheme that the public has chosen would be a nice scheme for the people who live right next to that park to look at. I'm looking out at the purples and the greens and the oranges every day when you get up. It might be a little bit too much. So, thank you for your input. We're really happy to find out that the big boulders are staying.
Yes.
That's sort of a landmark in Fort Hill. And as the children get older, at least in our family, I want to climb. Our approach always was, if you can climb it, go for it. We did not help them. We spotted them. And by the time they get up into grade school, it's like a personal accomplishment. And then you'll see the junior high school kids all sitting up there, chatting, whatever, phoning. So thank you for giving us some amenities in the park. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
Sure.
It
Appreciate
looks to me like we have a 4-bay swing there, so, I mean, I think, Nick, we can take that as a comment and figure out how to, which swings go where and how to do that. So that's easier.
Well, I move approval.
I'll second.
So we're approving the loop design of we're going with all the city recommendations, the staff recommendations.
Yeah, that's my intention.
Yeah, okay.
One question that I just had, not just for this part, but just for general, is the solar kind of lighting, solar panels, I know it's part of some of the city's plans for climate action. Is that something to explore for all the parks as a whole? And didn't know kind of what the timeline for around that. So I thought that was a great kind of suggestion to go into the package that way as we think about the future.
We're in the middle of the motion, so I'll come
Okay,
back to that.
sorry.
So there's a motion by Chris, is there a second?
Second.
Ben seconds it.
Yeah.
All in favor of, okay, opposed?
Started.
Now the solar is adding.
Yeah, I think the solar, if there's the right type of or line with the sun on the shelters, I think that's a great idea. I mean, especially in spots that are harder to get electric to. I think there's electric fairly close to this one, but even that, you're saving some on that cost of getting it there. You're able to use the sun's power, climate action. It's all good things.
All right. You're free to stay if you want, or leave. It's very warm in here, so.
Thank you. Hi, Nicholas. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item is item 7. Julie, continuing on, this time with Whispering Meadows Park.
Okay, Whispering Meadows, the last one, the smallest one. Here's the aerial. Whispering Meadows Wetlands Park is actually quite large on the southeast side of the city. It has a large open water area that you can see from the main road. It's just off of Highway 6. Has a wetlands area, but not much area that could actually be developed for open or for the playground space. But we do have this one residential lot here off of Indigo Court. It is the size of a residential lot, and it also includes stormwater overlay on drainage. So we can't even use the whole site that we have there, but it is enough for a pocket park. So that's what this project is looking at, is adding a small pocket park on the one residential lot. So the area here is the drainage way, so even the trees may not be there in the end. We're not sure about that yet, but we have to keep that open. But there is room to have a connecting path to the existing path around the wetland, to do the small shelter as we've talked about several times already tonight, and then to have a small play space here. So it is really a very much a pocket park. We would also get a drinking fountain and a new park sign. We did a neighborhood meeting for this. We actually held it at Weatherby Park along with a wreck and roll. Weatherby is also in the South District. We only had 3 or 4 people come to talk about Whispering Meadows. They'd all gotten their postcards though and were excited to come talk about it. And their general sense was anything you do would be great. So we didn't have a lot of, they had some questions about the rest of the park maintenance that we've taken care of since then. But the couple options here is, first of all, you could do the regular shelter like we've been doing, and that seemed to be the 3 or 4 residents that did comment, that was their preference. We also have a new swing, like a porch swing with a roof over the top. We have 3 of those going in at Riverfront Crossings very soon. That could be an option here too, instead of the square shelter.
One note on that square shelter, it's smaller than the other ones we've been talking about. It's more the size of like a Highland or Pheasant Hill, if you can those, so it is quite small, because that's all the site allows for really.
Oh, and the playgrounds are not there. In your packet, you have the 5 different playground options that were presented for this one. Staff recommendation would be option 3. Has a little bit of shade, has a little bit different design than we have had in other parks. And, yeah.
Maybe it's the scale, I'm not seeing the scale across the weight of the overhead, but it seems like it's really close to that neighboring house. Is there gonna be a buffer or something to kind of separate that?
There isn't. I guess it's something, maybe it would be a planted buffer, it could be not a fence, I wouldn't think, but we can definitely add that to the comments, and you're right, because it is a really narrow there.
I think there are those 4 trees between the playground and the property, but there isn't anything it looks like between the shelter and that.
That's a good point.
It's a similar distance as if there was an actual house on that site to that one, looking at the rest of that neighborhood though.
How do you feel about that shelter size?
They're well used in the other 2. I think we only have 2 parks that have them that small, but it is smaller than the others. It's not going to be like we put one picnic table in there. It's not going to be a big gathering space, but it's a place to get into some shade if you're there with your kids or grandkids.
I was wondering if Snyder had come up with any other ideas, like creative brainstorming. It's just such a neat area, and I bike by this all the time, and I never see anyone like a trail or go out and fish on a dock, or I don't know what creative brainstorming areas regarding the wetland area. Is there some way to have people enjoy this area more?
So Snyder was not given that scope for this particular project. This one is an outgrowth of the park master plan, which showed a shortage of play spaces, small play spaces in this district. So this was looking at specifically at how to get a playground area, and I didn't include that as much in my presentation. I would tell you that based on the feedback we've received, there are a lot of people out using that trail and having an interest in that park. So, a lot of people do fish there and use the boardwalk. So you may not be seeing it, but I think there is a fair amount of use by that neighborhood.
Maybe just because the road goes right by the wetland area, that would be.
Yeah.
There's people that fish from that side there. There's a bench there, a sign right there. Where the little loop is in the very center of wetland, there is a boardwalk that extends out onto that from the trail system right now.
Maybe I just need something on the other side where I'm, because I just don't. To me, it is a really neat area, but good to hear that local people, people that live close by me, they're using it then.
And we're currently improving the natural areas there with the REAP grant that's in progress.
So where's the boardwalk?
Right in the center of that circle space on the right there, Julie, a little bit south, right there.
Yeah, and see, I would bike over there on Lakeside, so I just don't quite see that far in.
Yeah, the neighbors we heard from were in 2 different cul-de-sacs, and then one from down here on the south side. So they live a lot closer to the trail that's there.
And there are 4 entrances from those cul-de-sacs. There's 4 different spots, maybe 5. And then you have Lakeside Drive as well has kind of that access. So it's a park with a lot of entries, I guess.
It's a unique little area there, yeah.
All right. We have
Move approval.
we need, which playground are we going to?
Whispering.
What's
Yeah.
that, option 3?
Option 3, it's a blue one with a big blue disc over the main play space.
And then do we need to recommend either the shelter or the swings?
Yeah, not children's swings, but shelter or a porch swing.
Or porch swing.
You have a preference?
Does anybody have a preference? I think the picnic shelter is, kind of goes well with the playground, but that's just sort of my thoughts on that one. All right, so if I hear, approve the plan with the option 3 playground and the normal smaller shelter. Is there a
Motion.
Alex motions? Chris seconds, all in favor? Aye. All right, opposed? All right. All right,
Yeah.
item, the report on items from city staff.
I do not have much tonight.
Okay.
I've done a lot of work so far, so
Yeah,
the more motions than we've had in a long time, so I'll let Tyler and Brad do their.
okay, very good, thanks. Brad?
Just a few brief updates on some activity that we've been having here. Robert A. Lee Recreation Center has been a busy hub. We had our Halloween event here on the 29th, so a couple weeks ago. And we had a number of community partners that joined us out here for that event, doing some different activities. We had activity stations and games set up really almost every nook and cranny of this place. And we had well over 1,000 people come out for that 2-hour event. And so it was great to see. Everybody was great about wearing masks. We didn't have any issues with that. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. The costumes were super cute. As always with the kids, there were some very inventive, creative ones. But it was just fun to see families out doing that kind of activity. And it was kind of close quarters here, with that many people here in such a short period of time. But everyone seemed to be relatively comfortable with that, and it seemed like a great event. We've got our first of 2 holiday markets happening here on Saturday. So Tammy's getting geared up for that. And that should be another event that brings out a number of different people out here. Youth basketball has started, so when you guys leave, you'll probably see some kids and their parents out here. So it's great to see all these different activities happening again. Our dehumidification project is still in progress over at Mercer. And we're kind of waiting to see when that final date is going to be where we can reopen. But in the meantime, our pool here has been the hub for everything that's going on. We've been accommodating Southeast Junior High, because usually they practice over at Mercer. Coralville has been helping us out by taking on City High's practices that would usually happen over at Mercer. Swim lessons, aqua fitness programs, lap swim, open swim, all those different things are happening here. So it's staying pretty busy. And then finally, kind of an update on the master plan project. We are still in the public engagement, community engagement phase. We're taking public engagement, for example, during the Halloween event that we had out here. Got some good public feedback. We'll have staff here this Saturday for the holiday market. We're going to be at the library for a few different dates next week. Kind of setting up shop during different times out there to gather feedback. And just trying a few other opportunities. Our statistically significant survey, there are some delays with that, but I think it's going to be going out very soon. And then we have our social pinpoint website. Hopefully you guys were able to all distribute your swim passes last week and get the word out about that. But feedback has been good about that too.
When does that officially close?
Well, we have an official, unofficial date of the 21st, but we'll still leave that open afterwards. So that will conclude our first phase, November 21st or so-ish, on or about. Then that feedback will be gathered, kind of packaged together. We'll be meeting as a steering committee in early December, looking at what are some gaps in the information that we have, or there's some additional information or some additional questions that we want to go out and ask the community. So we'll have some visioning that's going on there, and then we'll have a secondary public information, public input opportunities that will happen probably in December, January. So we'll be able to go back and kind of figure out, where there's some gaps in what we were looking for there. So it's coming along well. We're getting feedback on a variety of different fronts, and so hopefully next month we'll be able to report a little bit more on comprehensively how that information is coming together.
Thanks, Brett. Any questions? Great. Tyler?
Yeah, so changing of the seasons is kind of our theme right now. So everything from, we have the mulch kits on a couple of the mowers like we normally do. So we go around the spots with heavy leaf matter and mulch those up. You see guys following each other in the mowers. They're not chasing each other. They're just doing the best to get everything mulched. So that's going well. And that kind of gives a final mow to those areas too for the year. We are starting to switch over to snow equipment on some of the other things. There's chances of flurries in the forecast, hopefully not more than that, but some of that equipment that we're not using for other things at this time of year, we're starting to transition to that. Restrooms and drinking fountains are all winterized and everything, so staff has got that accomplished. We pushed that as late as we could this fall, knowing people were still using the parks, so we usually have a bit of a flexible end date. We don't promise them after a certain date, but this year we were able to keep those open a little bit longer. And then as far as park projects, Glendale Park, that's still moving along. Yesterday they had half of the path to the back plus the back section, all the paving done. I drove by on the way here. They got it all formed out all the way to the road. The panels that needed replaced right up next to the road as well. So I think they're probably waiting on a weather window to get that poured. And then unfortunately for that project, the shelter and the playground are delayed. So looking at probably a spring install for those, but the infrastructure is there, ready to go when those are ready. The footings and everything's ready for the shelter to be attached, and our staff is going to install that playground in the spring. Hopefully, as long as that is in by then. Just like everything else, we have delays right now. And one other project that's finished up since the last meeting is the trail on Iowa River Trail just down from our shop. We're happy to get that back open so people can use that trail. And Public Works kind of finished that out with the contractor. I think there's a little bit of seeding left to do on the edges, but it's been all backfilled and it's safe to use now. So it's all good.
I would mention the playground site at Glendale looks like it's going to be a swimming pool. So if you hear, why are we building a swimming pool? We are not. It's just the shape of it. It really looks like a really cool backyard swimming pool right now. And the only thing I should mention is there will not be this meeting next month. You've got an invitation for an online training for open meetings law. Instead, that'll be exciting, I'm sure.
So this is our last meeting for some of us.
That's a good
3 of us. Unless you This is my second term, and I think we only have 2.
I apologize because I missed that this would be the last time. Then we would have treats for you. And thank you.
When I talked to the clerk's office, they actually said we're all eligible to renew.
We were eligible to renew?
That's what she told me, but.
Because I remember Clay saying, you can only do 2 terms, and this is my second. Like, I'm finishing out someone else's terms. This is my second term.
That's just what she said.
I thought we only got 1 term. Anyway, well, Angie, thank you. Appreciate your contributions.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Assuming that this is it for you, so. And kudos to your guys' staff for soldiering on through all this. You know, labor's tight, it's hard to find people, but I'm hearing positive feedbacks from the people that are utilizing the parks and the activities as well, so thanks. And I don't have really any reports, so. Angie?
Are you gonna I think your term ends soon too.
My term doesn't.
And Ben as well.
So.
I've never been through there.
I might, I haven't thought of that yet. So I thought it was done.
I think there's an application date deadline too.
So,
I think it was last week.
no, well, I guess I'm done.
But maybe it's different. You should look, because when I was looking, I think, yeah.
I should know that.
suggestions for future agendas?
I don't today.
Chris?
All right, so I'm gonna follow up again on the Montgomery Mother House that I asked meeting before last and last one, whether or not we replaced the roof, when we did it, and how much it cost.
Not have that yet. I can tell you where the rest of it sits though. The Historic Preservation Commission has sent a memo to the council asking for direction on what will happen or what the council would like to see research done with it. I can get that out to you now. I've gotten it myself, and they are waiting for some direction back from that, and then would like to meet with this commission if indeed the council gives the go-ahead to look at it or not.
So Kevin Boyd, who chairs the Historic Preservation Commission, contacted Tammy, and he contacted me, and he sent me a memo, and he emailed me today, and I'm supposed to have coffee with him on Friday, and I was wondering if anyone else would like to come, although not a quorum. Friday, 3:30 at True Coffee. I guess he's just gonna talk about his memo, and I can, maybe you can forward his memo to the commission. It was from April of 2020. Essentially, it's just a little history about Montgomery Butler, yes, the house and the couple, which is interesting.
Oh, that's not the memo I have.
In April 2020, it's not an April 2020 memo?
But I can find out, yeah.
Anyway, so, I don't know what exactly has in mind, maybe to make a pitch for doing something with it.
And I'll see if I can find you the roof cost before that meeting.
Because he said in the supplemental that I read from April 2020 that it's in the Waterworks Park, but the land around the water treatment facility is maintained by Public Works. But I think we are still maintaining the house.
Yeah, it's a really mixed, it's called Waterworks Park. It is not truly a city park. It is Public Works land for the water treatment, but it's really kind of an interesting site, so.
So that makes me even more curious as to whether or not the roof is coming off the park's budget. If it's not actually in a public, like a park that the public use.
Yeah.
We're sharing some of the maintenance of that park with water, so we can have a partnership. We help each other out with that there. They do the most of it, but we do some maintenance out there as well. So like the porta potties, for instance, that are off of the parking area, those come out of our budget and things like that.
Very good. Melissa?
Nothing here.
Ben? Alex?
I want to thank the other commission members who, this is last week, appreciate all the work over this past year, so it's been great serving with you, so I want to thank you for your service. And also appreciate the social media updates. It was great to see some of the Halloween activities, so just kind of all the kids coming in, so a lot of great activities going on, so definitely appreciate all the hard work by the broader recreation team, so thank you very much.
Very good.